everybody. Welcome. It's nice to see you all. I'm just going to take a moment just to wait for people to come in and also just look around to see who's here. Hi, Emily Rose. Hi, Carr. It's nice to see people here that I recognize some of you. Anna Lucia, I think it's your name, Anna Lucia. Hi, how are you? And Laurel.
Hi.
Thank you all so much for being a part of the Off the Mat Book Club and Embrace Yoga's Roots. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to just acknowledge and introduce Susanna Barkataki, the author of this book, who you have been investigating and learning from and reading just this really incredible book over the last, I don't even know how long you've been all at it. I know you coming in at different times. Let me see if everyone is with us. Okay, people will just keep popping on, but I want to get started. Susanna, I want to welcome you. And what I want to do first, Susanna and I had a chance just to speak privately for a few moments. And I've also tried to take other opportunities to let Susanna know how incredibly important this book is. And I say that from a place of real sincerity. I was fortunate enough to be able to read this book when it was in its manuscript form. And I'm bad that way. Like when I read a manuscript, it's not the same experience as when you actually hold the book. And it was amazing in its just in its raw form. But when I received this book in the mail and held it in my hands and was able to sit down with it and look at the layout and the way it was organized and then reread it in this way, I knew in this moment, and I still believe that this is probably in this right now in our current reality, this is a book that needs to be included in every single teacher's training across the country. It's a book that every teacher, especially if you've been teaching for a long time, if you're a white-bodied person, this is a book that you must read, reread, challenge yourself, look at your own just perceptions about what yoga has been to you, what yoga is, and the way in which it's evolving. And that's why this book is so important, because it connects us to the roots of yoga, but also how the roots of yoga influences the evolution of this practice. And as teachers, as students, the way we're going to influence creatively the evolution of yoga going forward. And it's important that we understand the interdependence between yoga and social justice, yoga and white dominant culture, yoga and oppression, and to see that there has never been a separation between those realities. And what Susanna has done so beautifully in this book is that she makes a case for all of it, connects it all back to the traditions. It's accessible, super easy to read, applies to you personally, but also applies to the way in which you can approach your teaching. And so Susanna, thank you so much for bringing a book like this into the yoga world at this time, for working so hard. And I can see when I look at the table of contents and the way it's been massaged and organized, I know that you worked your ass off to make this book something that all people can connect to, relate to, including philosophers. You had a really interesting task of having to honor these roots and know what you were talking about and bring it into the 21st century so that you can educate people like myself. So thank you for your efforts, for your hard work, for your talent, for your skill. I'm very proud of this book, and I'm really grateful to you for putting yourself out there. So, hey.
Thank you. That's so awesome. That's just really, just feel like I got like loved up and filled up, and I'm so grateful. I'm grateful it's being received in this way, you know, that all that work is actually landing.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a couple of questions. I'm really curious about your process, having written a book, and you and I have kind of talked about this at other times. It's a really difficult process.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on, because you're not any true artist. When you're writing a book, of course you have your avatars and your muses out there, but it's also forcing you to have to look inward at your
Mm.
own experience, your own bias, your own limitations, your own denial.
Mm.
I have no doubt that a book like this, that is demanding like deep insight, wasn't challenging for you personally. And I'm wondering a couple of things. One, how was that for you? And also, what I'm wondering is, were you worried how others were going to receive this? If you were going to be judged or rejected or denied or anything like that? Like, how did you hold both
Mm.
creatively as you walked through the process?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, when I was a kid, I remember writing poetry, and I felt like the poetry or the stories that I was writing in poetry form just came through me. And the beginning of this book was like that. The very, very beginning was just essays about my family and about their experiences with yoga. Or like when I went, I think I kept it in there. I cut a good amount of the personal stuff, but where I went to my grandparent or my aunt and uncles after it was a Thanksgiving, like we have Indian Thanksgiving where so we have like curry and naan bread for Thanksgiving time that everyone gets together. And I was excited to ask them about the Indus Valley civilization and the Saraswati River Valley. I was just learning about the rich cultures that were alive and so powerful, that were the places where yoga was born and codified and developed. And I went and asked them, tell me what you know about our history and our culture. And I remember them saying, like, I can't, beta child, I can't tell you. I don't know. I learned British history. I can tell you about British generals or this fight or this battle. And feeling so like truly crushed that, and an understanding, because as they were saying it was like the realization of 400 years of colonial rule, or 200 colonial, 400 economic rule of India by the British, like happened again real time for me in that moment of like, all of that history is now gone, and then I went to my cousins who are my age or a little bit older, maybe 3-4 years, who were educated in India. Like, can you tell me Manjul, and they said the same thing. And so this is like the power of erasure of a story, of a narrative, of that history. And so I knew in that moment, I wanted to give time and space to both the history and the roots, but also the stories and the experiences of what it meant for them to be erased. And that wasn't easy. It was an emotional process. It was a lot of getting up early and coming down into, this is the backyard studio that I work in and practice and write in, where we used to have meditations and yoga asana space. And it was a lot of just allowing space for like purging and processing. And you're right. When I first started writing, I had a lot of doubt. One, that anyone else would care. Two, that it would matter. Then three, I got my act together and sent it to a publisher. And guess what they said? You'll have to take out the parts on the word where you use colonization, colonial trauma. It's like, oh, I can't do that. But it made me doubt. And this was probably 2019 when I did that. So it was a little while. It took the book, it was not like it happened overnight. It was a process. And so I had to really sit with, but they also gave me the useful feedback of, it's too much story. It's too much, too personal. And it needs to be a little more like objective for me to really get the point. And so I went back to the drawing board. I actually was so crushed, and some of you may have experienced this. I've experienced it many times or multiple times in my creative life, but I was kind of crushed enough that I no longer could think of it as a book. And I started to think of it as a workbook because I'm a teacher. And so I was like, all right, guess I can't get published. So I'm not going to write a book, but I can make a workbook. And that's when the structure that you were referring to in the table of contents really got born is, okay, let's simplify. Let's, pull it out and make it into bite-sized chunks that just make sense and are digestible. And then as I was writing that, I realized, oh, there's so many points that a workbook is maybe 100 pages, 80 pages. This is not a workbook, it's a book. And then I knew that I was going to self-publish because I wasn't going to go through that process again of taking it to a publisher. The publishing industry is like so many institutions, it's so white centered. It's so dominant culture centered. And so I just didn't want to subject myself to that. So I set about on the process of self-publishing. And while I self-published, I actually got a trademark complaint on the name, which was Honor Yoga's Roots. So it was like the literal process of what happened to yoga. I felt like it happened to my book, to me in the book. I got a trademark complaint on Honor Yoga's Roots as we were about to publish, like a month before. So I had to go through I had to, first of all, like have that come to, whatever, like my inner guide's soul moment of, do I fight this whatever, or yoga organization business that has all these resources in court for a purpose, for a value, or do I find some way to shift and adjust and move, and which one makes the most sense? And so that was tricky. That was tough because I wanted to fight, but it didn't make sense to fight. And it wouldn't have, I don't think it would have been a battle I would have won in a legal, in a court, because that's, again, how these systems work, right? And who they protect. And so that shift meant going back through the book, changing everything, reorienting, writing to folks like you, Seane, who had read it and being like, is it okay if we change in your quote, we change it to saying embrace instead of honor? And so it was quite a process. So honestly, by that point, it's like the people who don't like this book, I don't care. I'm just happy to have it out.
It's very interesting for what you're saying. Let me put that on gallery. It's very interesting what you're saying, though, the parallel between you writing this book and what happened to yoga, it being the eraser, and the you being the one who's now having to be rejected or persecuted for your own reality and your own truth. But it also makes sense that you personally, as an artist, would have to walk through that while simultaneously writing a book about yoga on this, because that's what it's inviting other people to do, is to have to look at their own stuff, to have to stand in the challenge that when you choose to do the deep inner work and start to ask those questions like, am I a racist? Do I live with bias? Do I act in ways that causes harm to others? The moment you begin to ask those questions, I really do believe that what gets exposed are opportunities to affirm that, yes, actually, that's true. You are a racist and you do live with bias and your behaviors are oppressive, because that's the only way to heal it. Right. And so often, people resist the creative process because it's so confrontational. Yeah. And it excavates these truths, like that you're having to really embody what your ancestors walked through. It makes sense to me that when you went through this creative process, that's the thing that you would have to really stand in, and commit, like to really dive in and commit to every word, knowing that this work is going to perhaps ease the pain and the suffering of those that come after you, of other Black or brown bodies that come into white yoga spaces. That maybe that the work and the effort that you have to do based on this creative process is going to cause less pain, less suffering for others. So it's very interesting to me. It doesn't surprise me that you had some of those challenges. I wish you didn't. Yeah. And at the same time, you did this. You wrote this. You sat down and said, I want to be an agent for change.
Yeah.
And I often feel like God then says like, great, then let's really unpack what that's going to look like. So
Yeah.
thank you for all the effort. Um, yeah, there's just so much. Like now that you're on the other side of the creative process,
Mhm.
have you experienced, do you feel relief? Do you feel any like PTSD? Like what the hell just happened? With 5 years of my life. Like how are you now?
Yeah. I love that. I mean, definitely going through that, the trademark challenge was it when I look back, that was like a spiritual growth moment because I had to really turn into my practice because I felt like a victim, right? I felt powerless. Um, I felt the weight of the injustice. Like the truth is too, it's funny, sometimes I think, and I wonder if you feel this way, Sean. It's like I am a yoga teacher. I often just want to show up and teach yoga philosophy, or maybe some meditation, or maybe some yoga asana or mantra. But do you know what people bring me in for? Well, it's cultural appropriation or cultural issues or anti-racism, right? And so this book, it's not even, I mean, is the book I had to write to get to the next expression of what is to come. And so in that way it does feel cathartic, feels like a process that I'm glad to not have to hopefully go through again exactly this way. But the other thing that's been really real is I sort of also wrote it and had to let it go. And I think a lot of people who create anything, like if there's artists in the space or musicians or, even a yoga class that you curate is kind of like this. Like you put the work, you think about what you're going to teach. For me, I script out my classes. So I'll show you. I have my little, I think I have it right here. Oh no, I don't. But I have like Post-its with the flow that I'm going to teach on it, right? And then I improvise on top of my plan. But at the end of the day, right, when I go to teach that class, what the students receive is theirs. It's not about what I planned or even my intention or even what I do. And it's the same with the book, and the messages in the book is like, it's about us. It's really, the movement of embracing yoga's roots. And for me, embracing yoga's roots is about the roots and the practice. Just as much though, it's about the people we are serving and the future, the past and the future of the people. So it's really about you all and about us creating this movement together. And that piece feels really like, I feel like I can kind of rest on, we're creating this movement together. We've been, folks like you've been doing this work for many, many years. There's other people stepping in, and we're like a critical mass now. We're way more than 100 monkeys. We're like all out there. And so that has been really joyful. So I think I feel like I can rest. There's been more rest. There's been more peace and more ease in my life. So that has felt, I'm very grateful for that.
Well, Susanna, now that it's been birthed, what are your hopes for not just the book, like, and the movement, but also for yourself going forward creatively? Do you have
Hmm.
a sense of where this might lead you in your future?
Well, I really love to write, even with all the challenging process that I just shared. I love to write. And so I'm looking forward to writing another book. And that is going to happen this year. And I'm excited for that. I am someone who actually, I get a lot of joy from being in the creative process. And that can be sometimes teaching, sometimes writing, sometimes running teacher trainings or whatever, and creating and co-creating, collaborating on movements for change. So I think just continued work, like in a way resting on what's been done, but then like it was a push, 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 push. And now it's like that coast a bit, but I know it's a coast that's heading into that new upswing, and I don't know what that upswing is going to be, but I know I'm going to ride this coast because it's coming, and then we'll see where it goes. Mm, and I think the other big piece for me, and you and Off the Mat do this so well, is really keeping an eye out and an openness to who and where are the other South Asian voices in particular that I need to, with the positionality that I have, especially being mixed, especially being light-skinned, right? Like, especially being caste privileged, to walk the talk of, like everything I say in the book, right? Uplift, resource. That when people come and they're like, hey, we want a South Asian yoga teacher in our teacher training, it's like, oh, great. Here's 5 other folks. And maybe you want some of them, or I'll do your keynote, but I also would love to have you look at this list of 20 teachers, BIPOC teachers, and consider who else you're inviting into your workshops. Oh, you're not paying your workshop teachers. That's really exploitative to invite in folks of color to teach without paying them. How about we change that, And so doing that work continually and just being like a good steward is how I see it, a steward and a collaborator, and continuing to learn. Like, still have so much to learn. We could all study this yoga practice for, I don't know, our whole lives and probably not be done.
Susanna, before everyone came on, you and I was sharing with you that had you written this book just 4 years ago, it would not have been received in the same way within the mainstream yoga community. The words that you use, like with your publishers, it would have been rejected.
Yeah.
And what's exciting is that the fact that it is doing so well, that you've got this book club right now and all these people who are on, who are even just a part of this conversation, it just says so much about the way in which the communities of yoga are evolving, and that perhaps the yoga all along was working, and that seeds are being planted and people are maturing and are really ready to receive information without personalizing it or thinking that somehow it's an insult when they hear words around whiteness, that it's a direct affront, rather than understanding that the disease of whiteness as a construct, and people now have that integrated where they're able to distance themselves and really recognize that this is a part of the conversation of yoga, that now someone who looks like me has to investigate, because I've prayed and asked for spiritual maturation, and having to confront my own internalized biases is a part of the inevitability of my growth. This is not a bad thing. This is a blessed thing. And it gives me so much hope when I see that a book like this is being received and celebrated, and that people are asking questions and taking it in, like hungry for this information. And so with that said, I would love I'd love to hear from all of you. If anyone has any questions for Susanna, I'd love to know, what's your experience of the book? Now, if you're a white person like myself, maybe you're having an experience of this different than perhaps a South Asian person or a person of color. And so just feel free to talk about your experience of this content, how it's impacted you, and any questions you might have for Susanna. I'm going to flip through the pages, and you can either, Emily Rose, I'm going to go ahead and unmute yourself and say hi.
Hello, Sean. Good to see you again. Susanna, thank you so much for everything that you're doing, not only with your book, but on your very active social media platform. I have so many friends who are practitioners, teachers who follow you, and I keep saying, buy the book, do the activities, do the journaling, do the self-inquiry. My question is regarding this, what you've just revealed to us about the title. And I love that you brought up the background of that, because your summit, Honor, Don't Appropriate Yoga, the word honor, I feel, has so much reverence, and I really associate with what you're doing for the practice and for the community. Do you feel like in any way, of course, we don't want to worry about what we've lost, but I wonder if there is a tone change for the book, or how you feel like embracing yoga's roots might feel different to the reader or to practitioners than honoring. I know it's kind of semantics, but I appreciate your work, and that's my question. Thank you.
Oh, Emily, I sat with that one. I sat with that one. I struggled with that one. I was pissed about that one, because yeah, there is a way that honor is didactic and is fierce and is like, you better honor, right? Like, and I missed being able to have that fierce power. But when I really reflected, I also knew that one, the work is the work, and it, like, what it's called, it could be, I mean, it can't be anything, but it kind of didn't matter that much. Like, the message was still going to go out there. And there is what I had to come to, part of my inner struggle or inner spiritual process was letting go of the victimization, being okay with what was lost. And then I actually sat and visualized the tree of yoga, like the roots, the trunk, the branches, and imagine and visualize myself sitting at the base of that tree and feeling the heart of the message of this work, and open to what the new name, as I took the time to grieve and let go of honor, which wasn't available to me anymore for the title of the book, and felt like, what is this new expression? And what I felt at the base of that tree and under the branches and the fruits, many of which we haven't even seen yet, or you are creating, was I felt embraced. And I also felt like I wanted the work ultimately, thinking of unity, like yoga uses as unity, is there is a quality and a way of like, we get to embrace this, like you each get to embrace this in your own way. And that felt really true and really right and really, really aligned, even though I agree with you, there was something lost. I actually love, embrace equally. And I'm not giving up on honor, don't appropriate yoga. I'm not gonna, if I have to go to court for that one, I guess they'll see me in court. Because that one, like, that's a fierce name and that should be fierce. But it's also like, it's just a summit. It's not like a copyright violation kind of thing. I mean, we'll see, but that's my intention anyway, is I trust that the work will have the destiny that it's meant to have. And this was meant to be embrace and not honor. And I'm at peace with that now.
Thanks, Emily Rose. Anyone else have a question for Susanna, or just a reflection about your own experience of reading this book, or any thoughts about the process? Again, I'm going to flip through. You can either like put a little icon of waving your hand, or you can literally just wave at me. And for those of you who don't have your screen on, I'm not quite sure how you would do that. You can also put it in the chat and type it in to the side, and I'll read it. Cara, is that you? Do you have your fingers up?
Yeah, I think that's me.
Yeah.
If it's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Hi.
Thanks,
Hi,
Susanna. I was on Instagram Live with you this afternoon, and then I just waited a couple hours or something. So here you are. Thank you. I'll just be quick. This question, I'm reading through the second time now, and I think it's page 54. Harm reduction. Is it possible to be non-Indian and teach yoga without appropriating? And I think pretty much your short answer is no, but you say it really nicely. And then say, when we're trying to do less harm, how would you address if you had to like correct someone else that's either in your audience or something like that? How would you do that?
Yeah. Well, this is a great question. I'm glad you went right to that. And it's true. It really is. I mean, it's really hard in a colonial or post-colonial context. I don't really believe there's such thing as post-colonial. I think it's just neo-colonial to not be causing harm. Just in the very same way that, you know, when you look at ahimsa, and many folks might interpret ahimsa to mean be vegan, right? Even those of us who are vegan, there's many thousands of bugs that are killed in the process of growing and cultivating the vegetables that I eat. And so ahimsa, or non-harm, is an aspiration. And in that same way, I think yoga and cultural appreciation is an aspirational thing, because we live in a context of systemic inequity. If we correct that, which I don't know if that'll happen in our lifetimes, but I certainly hope we move in the direction of more equity, then I think what we're doing is reducing harm. And so concretely what that can look like, I mean, I tried to write the 4th chapter all about specific things we can do. But I'll give a specific example, like in a YTT that I'm teaching. If I have a white student who is trying to go out there and do their own thing, and, you know, is kind of taking some of these ideas, but not being super aware or sensitive to the harm they might cause, maybe centering themselves, tokenizing, or, you know, I'll just bring it up. I'll say something. And I've had to get really good. So I'm a shy person, and I also am a people pleaser, which you wouldn't know. Many people don't like what I have to say. But I say that to say, like, I've had to learn to, like, take a deep breath and be like, hey, are you open to some feedback? You know, can I share with you how this lands for me? Or to interrupt and kind of try not to be confrontational, but like get on the same side with them. So we're like, wow, I can tell this really matters to you. Are you open to hearing how I receive this? And Seane knows, like, I've reached out to Seane with those kinds of, like, hey, are you open to hearing, like, this happened? Are you open to some feedback about that? And so I'm terrified every time I do those conversations, every single time. Maybe not every single time now. I've gotten a little more at ease with it, but it's taken me years. And even if the person doesn't change, I feel like a seed has been planted and maybe watered, or watered if it was already there in them, and that maybe down the line some change is possible. So I just kind of stay attuned and consistent. And then I do also want to say, for folks of color or other marginalized folks, I also monitor my own capacity. So if when I'm running a YTT, I'm in a capacity where I'm there to do that interruption and that support and that curation. But if I'm just hanging out with friends and something comes up, I check in with my own capacity as to whether I'm going to engage, or I tag team. I'm like, hey, you know, Seane, hey, Carrie, hey, you know, whoever, can you step in and can you say something? Or how are you resourced to handle this? Because I just can't right now. It's so harmful. Like the appropriation it's really getting to me. And that has helped me a lot, to have a community of people, which is always growing. It's always expanding, right? To tune in and to ask for support. Yeah. I also want to say hi, see Sarah, and I know Arti. I don't know if there's other South Asian folks on the call, but whenever we're talking about this stuff, I always like to just invite in if you have any reflections or anything, because in a way, even though the book, I tried to not write it just to any one person. I tried to write it like parts for white folks, parts for other folks of color, parts for South Asian folks, so we could all receive and feel validated and kind of grow. But it's always a sweet spot for me to hear if you want, without needing to put you on the spot. So if you don't want to speak up, you certainly don't have to.
I'm going to go through.
Go ahead. No, that's fine.
Okay, I'm sorry, Dean. I wasn't sure if you were going to unmute yourself. So please go ahead and share.
Well, the only thing I just wanted to share that just for myself, I've always found that the big emphasis, the big difference that comes between cultural appreciation and appropriation is really in you know, the recognition of one's own positionality and the sharing of it, and then really giving the respect where the respect is due, you know? So I think that it's, for people who have been living and teaching and studying yoga for a really long time, even if they don't come from a South Asian background, there's still definitely a place for those teachers to do the work that they're doing, but they have extra work to do almost, because they have to really make that acknowledgement, and they have to be so explicit with about their relationship with you know, these traditions and these knowledge systems and these cultures. And so I think it's actually a really beautiful opportunity. It can be a very difficult thing to do for people a lot of the time, because you feel very nervous to, you know, open that whole can of worms. But when people do that with grace and respect and love, I think that it travels so far, and it really, you know, enlightens everybody in the room, and it undoes a lot of the harm that's already going on, and it starts, you know, shifting that whole conversation in another direction. So yeah, I think it can be a beautiful thing for sure. Thanks.
Thank you. I think I have, we have time maybe for just for one more, if there's anyone else who wants, just go ahead and raise your hand, or put that little hand up if you want me to call on you. Am I missing someone? I don't know, Susanna, if you're seeing on your end.
Not yet. And it's so lovely to hear from you all, and also to hear from you, Sarah, and see you. Sarah's an old friend. And I see Arti's hand up, who's a new friend. And also both wonderful teachers. So if you want to pop your, this is right, like what I always love to do. If you want to pop your links in the chat, please follow other South Asian teachers. Arti.
I just wanted to, I love to tune in when Susanna's live or when she's speaking about her book, because I'm just so proud of her for writing this. I feel, I get emotional sometimes. She knows because I cry a lot, but I'm so proud of her for writing it, because it's been just so amazing watching folks wake up and being ready to have these conversations. And I wanted to speak to the fear that some of us feel when we bring up some of these topics in groups and online spaces, and we're worried about raising some of these points, and we don't know what we're going to face or what's going to come on the other side of it. And I love the idea of planting seeds and watering seeds. And yes, that does happen. And sometimes we have these conversations for the other people who are watching, because there's a collective and there's other folks who are paying attention to the conversations, and they're quiet, they're listening. So it's not just the one seed that you're planting, it's potentially many, many more seeds, and watering many, many more fertile grounds. So I just see this book as so special, and what's birthed from it, what's coming out of it in the next chapter is also so special. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you, Susanna.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for coming on and being a part of this, and for reading the book. And for those of you who haven't read the book yet, again, here it is, Embrace Yoga's Roots. And I truly cannot say enough about it. And just to echo Arti, I'm so proud of you, just as a friend and a sister on this path. I know the amount of work and effort that went into doing this, and the amount of risk that you took personally putting this out there on so many levels. I'm very proud of you. And I also know that you've opened the door for other people to be able to express themselves more safely as a result. It's like people can now go into a classroom, they can share this. And if people get angry at them, they can say, go talk to Susanna. She wrote this, it was published. And that's really the way in which we can start finding confidence in sharing this content when there are other leaders who have taken the time to write it down that we can join forces with. So some young teacher right now, some brand new young South Asian yoga teacher who's dying to say this, but she's afraid for her job. She's afraid for, future opportunities. She gets to hold up this book, read right from it, and that she doesn't personally have to take that, or he has to take that risk because you did. And I really want to just take the time to celebrate that, because I know, I just know, having written a book, I just know what it takes and how tireless the effort is. And I also feel it in my gut, the impact this book is going to have on so many teachers and students going forward. So I celebrate you, Susanna. I congratulate you, and I thank you, because I feel that you've elevated the conversation in a very concrete way that will have ripple effects in this community going forward for many, many years to come. So read this book, get it if you haven't already. If you're a yoga teacher in this space and you're teaching teachers trainings, I challenge you to put this on the book list today and to take time. Don't just invite them to read it and then ignore it. Sit with it. And especially if you're a white-bodied yoga teacher like myself, you sit with this content and notice what's uncomfortable for you. How are you going to find your voice in relationship to this work? We have to, all of us, take accountability for the way in which we embrace yoga's roots going forward. And if we've benefited from this, from the practice of yoga, now is the time to actually kind of pay it back and shift up the understanding of yoga within our own bodies, so that going forward, the experience can be transformative for ourselves and for each other. So Susanna, thank you so much. Do you have any final words that you want to share with the group?
I'm just really grateful for all of you, and I want to hear about the transformations that you're creating, and I'm excited to see how you move this work forward, because it's all of ours. So let me know. You can message me on social media. I'm very active there. Someone else said, because I'm like an edutainer. That's how I see myself. It's like an activist and an edutainer. So that's where you can find me in. Really grateful for all of you. Really grateful for you, Seane, and for Off the Mat for tirelessly and continually doing this work and foregrounding and uplifting so many different teachers of color and of culture and of different experiences, and just continuing to do that through the decades that have passed, and I know for many to come. So really, really grateful. And come to the next book clubs, because this is going to be a regular thing. There'll be other books, other wonderful books. So let's keep engaging, keep learning, keep supporting one another with this work.
All right, everybody, thank you so much. We wish you all just so much continued happiness and deep, deep work. And we'll see you the next time. God bless. Mwah.
Thank you. Bye.
You can unmute yourself if you want to say goodbye.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.